Good morning, everyone. I realized that some things actually don't change. When I was a student, I always got the first morning slot on the days when Randy has his marathon meetings with the students. And then he also made us come back on Saturdays back then. Anyway, I'm Chenny Chua from UC Berkeley, and welcome to the first session on Big Data and Data Centers. Our first speaker is Chervenak. She received her bachelor degree from University of Southern California, and her master and PhD from UC Berkeley, and she's PhD student number 8, I think. She's currently assistant director of Center for, she's currently at Aerospace Corporation. She is a senior engineering specialist in computer research department there, and her research focuses on data mining, distributed computing, resource management, management and analysis of large scientific data sets.
Thank you. So I have no slides. I actually went to make some, and I couldn't figure out how to make slides for what I wanted to say. So, so I'll just be non-slided today. Yes, thank you for the introduction. Recently, after 16 years at USC, I moved to the Aerospace Corporation just 2 months ago. So actually, I have no idea what I'm doing there yet, but hope to figure that out. So I had a long career at USC looking at data management in grids and distributed computing, policy-driven data management, and most recently, data mining. And so I'm hoping to bring a lot of those things with me to aerospace. Aerospace is interesting. I didn't know too much about it before I joined. It's an FFRDC, a federally funded research and development center, so something like a government lab. And its primary sponsor is the Air Force. And it's really dedicated to satellite-related research. So they act as kind of an independent technical advisor to the Air Force, the NRO, NASA, and so forth on all issues related to satellites. You know, they're the people who, on the satellite side, which I know nothing about, but they're the people who say, you know, they're there and they have the power to say, you know, this launch shouldn't happen because we foresee a certain problem. And for example, after the recent SpaceX explosion, you know, SpaceX obviously is doing their own internal investigation of what happened, but aerospace has also been tasked with taking that data and doing an independent investigation. And so it's a very interesting place. And on the computer systems research side, we're really focused on what the ground systems should look like for satellites. And so it's been interesting to see that the Air Force currently and previously other agencies have really looked to modernize the ground systems and to kind of come up with a general enterprise architecture for those. And they're very interested in looking at current technologies, clouds, containers, microservices. And so it's a very, I think sometimes we think of the military as being fairly backward, but it turns out that there are people who are trying to bring the technology into the modern era, which is great. And so I hope to be able to contribute to that. So what I decided to do today is to, and I didn't know that I would be first when I started thinking about it, but I just wanted to say a little bit, not about the technical side, but about what Berkeley meant to me and what Randy's help has meant in my life, because I think that's true for many of us here. So my background was a little bit unusual for a student coming to Berkeley. I had an EE degree from USC, and I was very much an electrical and engineering student, but I was interested in computer architecture, and in computer architecture at Berkeley is in the CS department. So, I'd applied as a computer architecture person, and my choices for grad school were Stanford, Berkeley, and UC Irvine, which was kind of my backup school because I wanted to come up here to the Bay Area. And I remember once I got accepted to both Stanford and Berkeley, I came up to visit, and my parents came up with me because they kind of wanted to check it out too. And I think I came to Berkeley first, and for some reason, you know how you have the visit every year of the prospective grad students, and for some reason I didn't get invited to that, or I missed the invitation or something. And so I came something like a week late. And so they scrambled and they put together something for me. And what I most remember about that was going to coffee with Susan Eggers and David Wood and Mark Hill, and they took me out to coffee and they talked to me about what it was like here, and I was hooked. I was sold. And I was like, that's what I want. That's who I want to be. And that was it for me. And meanwhile, on the other side of campus, my parents were taking a tour, and there was some sadistic student tour guide who was regaling them with crime statistics for seriously, and how many people had been raped that year. And they were freaked out by the time we got back together. And I'm like, no, I like it here. I like it here. And then we went to Stanford. It was so pastoral and clean. And I remember my mom, I think she literally begged me to go to Stanford. And I said, no, that's what I want. And so I came here to Berkeley. And my background was very middle class. My parents, I didn't know anybody in academia. I didn't know anybody who had a PhD. I didn't know what that meant. I think maybe I applied for the PhD program because it had better fellowships available. I'm not really sure. That was how little I knew about it. My parents were both very smart, but they just didn't have the opportunities. My mom was first generation. Her parents were immigrants from a little village in Sicily. And when her older sister, I think back in the 30s, because her older sister was much older than she was, when she had an opportunity to go to a teacher's college, my grandfather literally said, no daughter of mine is going to college. And so that's what she grew up with. But she and my dad both valued education. He went straight from high school into the Navy, and then after the Navy, he went into aerospace, and he went to school at night, and he got his bachelor's degree in math and his MBA at night school. And so, how so often our expectations for ourselves are shaped by what we're exposed to. I figured I'd get a master's degree like my dad, and that would be great. And so when I got here, I didn't really know. I was clueless, basically. I didn't know anything about research and what that meant. And so, I arrived in Berkeley. I was very happy, but I didn't really know what to do. And that first year, I just basically acted like an undergrad. And in some ways, that was good for me because I had no computer science background other than computer architecture on the EE side. So I didn't know anything about operating systems or compilers or theory or anything, and so I had to actually take some undergrad classes to get the background. And so, so that was kind of the first year, and that was fine as far as it went, but because I was really shy, I wasn't getting integrated into the department. And so it wasn't really until the second year when I started thinking, I guess I better get hooked up with an advisor, that I started investigating that. And when Randy picked me to join his group, then of course everything changed for me. And that was a really pivotal time for me. And so, I was still really intimidated by everybody. Some people feel like everybody is ahead of them in grad school, but everybody really was ahead of me in grad school because I didn't know anything about computer science, so I had to really play catch up when I got here. But what was great about joining Randy's group was, suddenly you're immersed in a functioning research group, and you kind of see how it's done. And I was in weekly meetings with Randy and weekly group meetings, and seeing how other people, thought about research and talked about research, and then, Randy always had high expectations for us, so I started having to present at these meetings and started to do research. And my first project. My first big project was to do the measurement of the first RAID prototype, RAID 1, and that turned into my first paper, a sigmetrics paper, and also became my master's project. And so that was really great because I could really immerse myself in that and have something to do. I recently came across something. It was the first draft of a paper that I ever gave to Randy, and when he gave it back to me, it was covered with ink. And I kept it all these years. I still have it because I thought this was great. I was used to being a good writer and a good student, and I didn't get papers covered with ink. And so it was a real wake-up call that this was stepping up a level, and that Randy's expectations were high. And I've kept that all these years as a reminder of what a hands-on advisor you were, how much effort you put into making things good, and that things with your name on them, were required to be of a certain standard. And that's something that I've carried on with my students over the years, sometimes much to their annoyance. sometimes they really hate that and they see it as micromanaging, but that's a lesson that I took from you, that, when something has your name on it, it should be good. And just the culture that you created here is so special and so unique. The way we helped each other with constructive criticism is something that has been really instrumental in my career. I remember, the trauma of those first early practice talks when your fellow students would rip you apart and everything from your font size to the bullets used on your slide to the technical content. But, I never went out into the world to give a talk where I had a tougher audience than my friends at Berkeley. And that was just instrumental in teaching. And that is not the culture everywhere. When I went to Georgia Tech for my first job, and I went to my first practice talk there, and I just gave the kind of feedback I would have given here, and it was not it was not welcome. And I remember the senior professors and the faculty, they kept saying things like, "Wow, you're really direct." I guess so. That was clearly, I got that message loud and clear that was not the way things were done there, and so I could do that in my own group, but probably not in the larger group. So it is a unique culture where we learned from each other, and that Randy created this environment that really fostered immersion and support, and all these great things. I remember how instrumental the RAID retreats were for me, that we'd go up to Tahoe and we'd have these industry people there and we'd have to present our work, which was really terrifying for such a shy person. But it was a great experience, and it was always a supportive experience. And it was great, too, to be exposed to everyone else's talks. One of the things I thought was great about what you all did was that John's students and Dave's students and Randy's students and Mike Stonebreaker's students, we all we worked together, we hung out together, our projects were related, and so we learned a broader research vision than just our own little piece of the pie, and that was really helpful. And then, I had some great experiences on those retreats, rooming with Mary Baker and Margot Seltzer. We were kind of little three musketeers there, where we had some mutual support, which was very helpful. I was telling John Hartman that Margaret used to sit in the front row for my talks, and she knew how nervous I was, so she'd sit in the front row and she'd smile and nod her head. She was very supportive, always. What I didn't appreciate at the time was how easy Randy made everything look in terms of his support for us and what we were able to do. He made the technical stuff look easy, and I don't know whether it is easy for you or whether you just make it look easy, but he gave great advice, and he picked great problems always, and he helped us to learn how to do that, and that's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing to teach either. And as I said before, holding us to a high standard. One of the things that I've learned is much harder than he made it look is having consistent levels of funding for students. It's just really tough out there to have the kind of environment that we had, and I have not succeeded as well as he did in providing that for students. I don't remember ever worrying about money as a student, whereas there have been times when I had to say to my students, if this grant doesn't come in, you're going to have to do a TA-ship next semester. I don't think Randy ever said that to me. I don't know whether he said it to anyone else, but to maintain that and to shield your students from it is a real gift, so that we could have the time to learn what we needed to learn and do what we needed to do. Because for someone like me who came in without a lot of background, it took time. It took extra time. And so if I'd been on a strict clock and the money was running out, that would have been a different experience for me. Choosing good students and managing them well, that is a lot harder than you made it look. I have made a lot of mistakes with my students. I've picked students I shouldn't have picked, and I've made mistakes in managing them. And so I appreciate that you were able to do that and to make it look easy. And to consistently support us over the years. So Randy didn't just help me get a job after grad school, but a few years later, when I wanted to come back to Los Angeles, Randy actually recommended me for the job at USC that I had. and where I was for 16 years. So he's a consistent friend and supporter who will help you at any stage in your career, and that's a valuable thing and much appreciated. The other thing that I wanted to say is that, the support that Randy gave us in terms of having stable financing, and it helps because grad school, as we all remember, is really hard, and it takes a really long time. And so while it's going on, you have a lot of life events that are very tough at times. While I was a grad student, I got married, and then a few years later, I got divorced, all during the course of grad school. That was really traumatic. And Randy had a great way of being supportive without being intrusive, which is another talent, I think, for an advisor, because it's easy to overstep. I have a tendency to go too far in the other direction and try to be buddies with my students, and that doesn't often, sometimes that doesn't work out well. Sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't. And so, that and knowing that, your funding was stable, your research was stable, kind of gave me an anchor when life was tumultuous. And I know a lot of other people had illnesses, some had babies, some had life events. And so, grad school is a time of life, because you're here for a long time, where a lot is going on. And having a supportive advisor can really, make that better and easier. So, when I look back at grad school and I think of Randy, I think, how much I have to be grateful for that you chose me in the first place to be on this wonderful project, and, how much that meant to my career. That you taught me how to be a researcher, which I definitely did not know before I arrived here. And in particular, how to pick research problems, that you supported me. I don't know if you remember, but when I was at Georgia Tech, I think it was my second year, you gave me funding to come and work at Berkeley for the summer. And that was really helpful. It actually led to my NSF Career Award, the work that I did that summer. And so, things like that, over time have just had an enormous impact on my life and my career. And the culture that you created here has really been something that I've aspired to, not always been able to recreate, because it is unique in my experience. So anyway, I feel like I'm just one of many students whose life that you changed in very profound ways, and I'm very grateful for that, and I feel very lucky that you were my advisor. So thank you for all that. Thanks. I don't know what questions you can ask about that, but feel free. Any questions? Okay. Thank you. Okay.
So really, this isn't supposed to be that much about me. But I was wondering, I remember when I was in Washington, and sort of what your recollection of the sort of remote advising experience kind of was, because you were finishing up at that time. I remember maybe a little strain in our relationship, so you could also show sort of the dark side of Randy.
Dark side of Randy. The dark side of Randy. Okay, so that part was harder for me. When Randy was remote, because he was super busy. He was doing the DARPA thing, and he was computerizing the White House, as I recall, and doing all kinds of things. But it worked out fine in the end, because you were still available to me. And then what I did was I just went to Dave, who was here, and I said, can you kind of do local advising? And he was great and really helped out. So the combination of the two. So then I got actually the best of both worlds, because I had both of you advising me. So that worked out great.
Great.
Thanks.